You can now get a 30-day trial to experience The Athletic for free. Visit the link in the description below to try it now.
The World Cup has taken place once every 4 years, ever since 1930, a tradition that has only ever been interrupted by the outbreak of the Second World War. But now, Gianni Infantino and Arsene Wenger, FIFA's president and head of global development respectively, want to double the number of World Cups and introduce a 2-year cycle between tournaments. Où est la piscine? Well, the first reason for that is because of revenue. Now, FIFA earns around £4 billion every 4 years, and as you'd expect, the bulk of that comes from the World Cup. In fact, FIFA actually runs at a deficit in non-World Cup years, the stupid idiots. Compare that to good old UEFA, whose flagship tournament, the Champions League, runs every year, along with their own European international tournament every 4 years. That's right, UEFA's much better revenues of around £11 billion are much better revenues. Banknote! So, FIFA may see more World Cups as an obvious way of redressing that balance, and revenues are important. FIFA has 211 member nations, and not all of them are particularly good at football, be it Namibia, Mongolia, or even Scotland. In fact, the vast majority of those have never been to a World Cup and are never going to. Like Scotland! Even with the 48-team format that will debut at the 2026 tournament. You see, for the game to develop in those territories, there is a dependence on FIFA's subsidies and grants, which theoretically would be further funded by staging a World Cup every 2 years. And also, there are other countries than the one that you live in, and so it might come as a surprise to you that some people actually like this idea. For example, the Confederation of African Football, CAF, is already fully supportive of the idea, and other regions are expected to follow suit. The Confederation of North and Central America, CONCACAF, have already released a supportive statement which urged other organizations to be open-minded and look beyond the interests of the few in a thinly veiled dig at European self-interest under the UEFA banner. You see, Europe does cast a very large shadow, but that's because it's quite big, like a big building, or an even bigger building, or a big elephant, or an even bigger elephant. Because of course, many nations depend on FIFA's handouts for their evolution, and even their survival. Alternatively, opposition to the idea is similarly easy to explain. The idea of adding another vast, energy-sapping tournament to an already packed calendar is very unappealing, largely because most footballers are humans who require rest. And as we all know, humans are made out of skeletons who require that rest to conserve their spooky energy. Humans are built in a factory, bone by bone, until the skeleton looks as spooky as possible. Once the skeleton is the spookiest that it can possibly be, it's ready for the next stage of production, where it is made to wear flesh pajamas. Now, some people say that I am hiding the spookiest skeleton in the world inside of my flesh pajamas, but I guess we'll never know the truth. Until, of course, the day that the skeleton inside me escapes out through my mouth and runs off into the sunset. All to be spooky. Now, the potential threat to human player welfare limits UEFA's own opportunities for future expansion too, because of course the Champions League is growing in 2024, and this season was the first season of the new Europa Conference League. Plans are unlikely to stop there. At a recent meeting of the European Club Association, now chaired by Paris Saint-Germain's Nasser El Khelaifi, the reaction to 2 World Cups was universally negative. Wenger, of course, believes that that's wrong. He's assembled a disparate working group of ex-coaches and players, including Ronaldo, Avram Grant, Roberto Carlos, Peter Schmeichel, Rupert the Bear, the Green Power Ranger, and a ham that has come to life, as well as Mikel Silvestre, to support his case. One of the arguments in favour of the mad plan centres on opportunity. A player's career is short, and doubling the number of World Cups provides a great chance of qualification and involvement. Perhaps if the competition were biannual, Lionel Messi would have won 1, or Cristiano Ronaldo might have won 1 too. But instead, one player has won no World Cups, and the other player has not won 1 too. Puzzle! Married with the expanded tournament format, many more players would theoretically be able to take part, even though the competition would still be comprised of the same bedrock of developed nations. At the very least, though, the great players from each era would have double their chance of World Cup glory. Even Scotland. But the big selling point in Wenger's eyes is that, contrary to fears over burnout, he believes such a change would actually be beneficial to the players. Wenger's plan is to eliminate international friendlies completely, a move which would surely be popular everywhere. And also, in Europe, do away with the labyrinth-like Nations League, which nobody cares about, creating 2 blocks during the year when club football would give way to the national team. And that would be preferable to many in the club game who are frustrated by international football's constant interruption. Instead of 3 breaks between September and November and one further one in the spring, during which players routinely take long flights, cross multiple time zones and subject their spooky skeleton bodies to the kind of stresses that over time can damage their conditioning and shorten their careers and spookiness, Wenger is proposing a compulsory 25-day rest period for every player every summer. Now, that's a nice idea, but whether it's realistic or even workable is another issue. What Wenger is proposing would be the most significant reformatting of football in the professional era, and to achieve it would need significant compromise from federations willing to forego their own tournaments and their own self-interest. Would UEFA sacrifice the Nations League? Would its member clubs be happy to resist any further continental expansion? What would happen to the Copa America and the sprawling Copa Libertadores and the Africa Cup of Nations? Who is the spookiest skeleton? Is it Jacques de Bons? Look, what I'm trying to say is that we bought a skeleton and we now really need to justify having bought a skeleton on our budget. He's a captain! And so, the answer to these questions remains unclear, as does any route towards an agreement or negotiation. According to reporting by The Athletic's Matt Slater, Wenger is hopeful of getting his idea approved before the end of the year, despite there being no real precedent for how such a process could even be engineered. And that's before considering the other complications, including whether there are enough nations to be able to stage a 48-team World Cup to justify that change, or how the calendar could jiggle the kind of climate issues created by the decision to hold the competition in Qatar, for example. And no great attention, too, has been paid to whether the 2-year World Cups are even desirable. Desirable? A point made by fans, journalists and players alike is that the 4-year cycle keeps the event special and safeguards its prestige, with the fear, of course, being that both could be greatly eroded by the increased regularity. Now, this would be like if Santa came round your house every single week rather than each year, and instead of having his hard-earned nip of whiskey, he instead drinks all of your booze before flying drunk onwards to the next house. Because when you think about it, when you leave whiskey out for Santa and he drinks it then flies his magic reindeer to the next house, he is driving under the influence, and you're not allowed to do that, even if you look like a friendly granddad. And then think about how problematic that is. Not only is Santa some sort of sorcerer capable of creating anthropomorphic flying mammals, and not only does he keep elves trapped against their will in a freezing cold part of the world that nobody is allowed to go to, but he also drives that sleigh whilst absolutely shit-faced.
I am Jacques de Bons.
Thanks, Jacques de Bones. Arsene Wenger, though, is utterly convinced that he's right. His small army of ex-footballers thinks so too, and the big voting blocks from all around the world, built from many of the countries who don't usually have a voice on the pitch, seem broadly united. South America and Europe have a fight on their hands. Consultation talks with FIFA are set to begin before the end of September.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is where the Manchester United reporters revealed the truth behind the club's Jadon Sancho transfer fiasco, where the Tottenham reporters brought you news of Gareth Bale's return before anyone else, where the Chelsea reporters told us 3 days before his sacking that Frank Lampard was on the verge of losing his job. And you can try it now for free for 30 days. See the link in the description.